Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday night Anamkara meditation program. And with all my heart, with all my love, I welcome you to our program tonight. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being one who is engaged in practice and committed to practice and walking the truth of your highest nature into the world. And that's what Anamkara Meditation Foundation is all about, supporting people in their meditative practices, because that's what opens the door to the truth of who we are and the boundless love and compassion, kindness and patience we can then bring to the world. So thank you for coming this evening. Tonight is the first Thursday of the month, so tonight in our cycle of programs is a Dharma talk. So we'll be talking more about, practice and both the specifics of practice as well as some of the underpinnings of the philosophy and teachings that inform the practices. But first we're going to begin with the opening mantras. A foundational practice, mantra, because mantra is a throb of the infinite. Mantra is Shakti. And so in a Shakti tradition, in a Kundalini Shakti tradition, that power is at the root of all of yoga. That's true across yogas, but especially in classic Kundalini Yoga. It's that awakened Kundalini Shakti that is the inherent power in mantra, in awakened mantra, Chaitanya mantra it's often called. And so we make use of the power of mantra in order to shift consciousness, because really that's what the meditative practices and the living state of meditation is about. It's shifting our consciousness out of the confines of the ordinary mind and all that is contained there, and opening the doors to the infinitude of who we truly are. And mantra is a sublime and powerful vehicle for doing that. So we'll start now with the opening mantras. Srimati Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai, Gajananam Bhutanganari Sevitam, Kalpita Jambu Palacharu Bhakshanam, Umasudham Shokam Vinashakarakam, Namami Vigneshwara Parapankajam, Shri Ganeshaya Namaha, Shri Ganeshaya Namaha, Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamandaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Srimati Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai. So once again, with all my heart and with all my love, I welcome you to our program tonight. That sweet stillness, that sweet silence, that's what the power of mantra, the throb of the Shakti, the power of consciousness, Shakti is the universal, unbounded, infinite power of consciousness that also takes the form of sound, and that's the real power of mantra. So tonight we're going to actually be talking some more about that, and especially in the context of teachings from the Shiva Sutras. You know, the Shiva Sutras we've talked about many times, and it's a foundational text for understanding especially the workings of consciousness and the workings of the power of consciousness that's known as Shakti, and the power that's inherent to each person is Kundalini Shakti. So a lot of different terms, but all referring to this boundless power. And understanding that and understanding how the practices fit in with that, because the sadhana, the spiritual practices of the Shakti traditions, the awakened Kundalini tradition, are very different in a sense than ordinary practices of Hatha Yoga or other kinds of yogas, which had their foundation in Kundalini and were seen as practices to do to prepare the vehicles of mind and body for the awakening of this power of consciousness. And so many of the practices that come out of the other yoga traditions were actually, they were first seen as spontaneous movements, what are known in the Shakti tradition as kriyas, refers to the movements of the energy, the spontaneous movements. And as those were recorded over centuries and systematically used, they were seen that, oh, they can help both prepare the mind and body and prepare it for that awakening. One of the most potent ways that that awakening of Shakti and Kundalini comes about through is the vehicle of mantra. And so mantra, through a lineage and through the direct experience that those who've had unfolding the power of mantra, then becomes a way of just passing that on. And it becomes a key to the practice of Kundalini sadhana. Because once that power begins to awaken and is moving, there's a shift that's happening behind the scenes, so to speak. You know, before awakening, the motive power behind practice is the individual will. You know, we think about, oh, I'm going to do this asana, I'm going to do these number of practices, I might do this number of mantra repetitions, I might do this kind of action in the world, karma yoga. So behind the different yogas and their practices was this choice and this engagement, and I'm going to do this. With the awakening of this innate power of Kundalini Shakti, this power of universal consciousness, now there's a shift. And so now it's not so much, and this is a challenging shift for the ego mind, because rather than the ego being in charge of sadhana, its task now is to attune itself to this power of the divine operating within, this throb of the infinite that's vibrating as sound, as mantra, the very source of which is inside your own being. So mantra becomes a way of consciousness becoming so refined and so expanded in that refinement that we begin to spontaneously be able to also hear mantras arising. Because that's where they were originally heard by the ancient rishis in deep meditation, hearing the throb of Om, and the one sound of Om splitting and becoming So Hum, or the Hum Sa, the I am that. And out of that comes all the many different vowels and sounds in the Sanskrit language that comprise mantra. But the original throb and all those forms, well, they can be found in the deeper states of meditation, along with other primordial sounds called nada, that also are a sign that the energy, this power, this innate consciousness is opening the doors to these more refined, more subtle, and more expanded realms of consciousness. So Kundalini sadhana in that way isn't just about the mind saying, oh, I feel like doing this, or I want to do that, or I'm going to do this. It's listening. It's listening. It's also listening to what that teachings or practices that come through the lineage that had that power awakened and is passing that on as a reliable way of becoming more and more deeply attuned. But it's attunement, and with that, surrender. Surrender becomes the key. Surrendering to the waves of that grace, the waves of Shakti. In other traditions, we could call it the spontaneous movements of Holy Spirit. We could call it the spontaneous movements of Chi. But in the yogic traditions, it's known as Kundalini Shakti, and they really explored the depth and the breadth of what this power is and how it transforms the body and mind in ways that are simply beyond the power of the ego mind to do. You know, the ego mind is part of this limited vehicle, and so it can only do so much. And so, yes, the ego mind can get us to sit for meditation, then it has to let go. It has to let go into the throb of the mantra, the throb of the simple awareness of I am that, I am all, Shivoham, I am Shiva, I am the auspicious one. But it's a letting go into that. So there's a real shift, and now the direct experience of practices being supported from within by this power of consciousness. So when we're understanding the practices, we want to understand it in the context of this unique awakened Shakti Kundalini, because it goes far beyond than what the ordinary will, the ordinary mind, and its ordinary practices can do. As good as they are, as important as they are, but they only go so far. And the yogis saw this, millennia ago, and then it's literally a power of grace that needs to take us all the way. The ego mind is part of that limitation that when we're identified with it is binding us to this ordinary state of consciousness. Well, it was the Shakti that created the ego mind, created identification. And so it's Shakti that's going to relieve us of that. So when we were talking a few weeks ago about the Shiva Sutras, and one of the sutras in the first section of the Shiva Sutras is Yanam Bandha. In fact, it's the second sutra. The first sutra we had also talked about is Chaitanya Atman, the self, the para Atman, really, the universal self, is consciousness, pure consciousness, Chaitanya Shakti, this awakened, alive consciousness. That's the nature of the self. So part of what the Shiva Sutras are also helping us understand is, well, so what happened there? If that's the nature, the very root of who we are, that is known as Sat. It's unchanging. It's the same at all times, in all places. Right? How do we get this ordinary experience? The next sutra, Yanam Bandha, really addresses that, because it's saying knowledge is bondage. But they're talking about the knowledge of that goes with the ego mind. I am this, I am that, I'm not this, I'm not that. That knowing oneself as limited is what binds us. It's taking on that it's not just a thought arising, I become the thought, I am the thought, and then I'm confined by that thought, or that feeling, or that emotion, or that role that I'm playing. So that limited knowledge is what contracts us and shapes the universal consciousness. Right? That universal consciousness, when it enters a container, think of it as like fluid, like water. When water enters a container, it takes the shape of the container. Right? So when consciousness enters a thought form of, well, I'm happy, or I'm angry, or I'm so irritated. I am, and then whatever comes after it is consciousness entering that container, giving us the experience of it, but we get locked in there. we take it as I'm only that. I'm only this body. I'm only this limited mind. I'm only this role that I play. Universal consciousness never loses itself, never gives up the fullness of itself, even when knowing what it is to be finite. So even when it knows and is experiencing bondage in yanam bandha, what's illuminating that? What's illuminating that thought? What's illuminating even the experience of being caught or bound? That luminous awareness, that luminous consciousness, that's Shakti. That is Shakti Shiva. That's the auspicious one in its power of boundless consciousness. Both are operating simultaneously, right? Both this experience of limitation and the unbroken awareness of our infinitude, never bound, never suffering. So the practices are aimed at adding to the sense of limitation our infinite nature. So it's a tradition that embraces everything. It's like, it's all Shiva. Na Shivam vidyate kvachet. There is nothing that is not the consciousness of Shiva. It embraces everything. Last week when we were doing the Heart Sutra, that was a practice aimed at, like with medicine, aimed at the disease of suffering, that identification. So in the Heart Sutra, it was like in Vedanta, neti neti, you're not this, you're not that, you're not the nose, the ear, the eyes, the mouth, nothing, you're nothing. You're none of the things that you ordinarily would identify with. But it then doesn't posit anything, it's just like, leave it all. Because the truth is, any concept that you posit as what you are is just another limited concept, right? So it wipes out all concepts. And then you wind up in the same space of awareness that is Shiva consciousness, right? And it's that awareness that's then referred to in a later sutra, in the first section of the Shiva Sutras, and it says, Yanam Jagrat. And Yanam Jagrat is knowledge is wakefulness. This is now the knowledge of our infinitude. This is the knowledge of I am that, and that is all, everything. All there is that. I am that, I am that, I am that, I am that. That awareness is what the experience of pure Shakti, pure Kundalini, pure Shiva nature, that's that unbounded awareness. And so the practices are aimed at shifting our consciousness out of the confines of different forms that we've taken on and inhabited, so that we can regain the infinitude of who we are. The forms will remain as long as they remain. The body remains as long as its karma continues, and then when it's done, it's done. But consciousness doesn't have to be bound by that. And the fullness of that unbounded consciousness is always present at all times, in all places. And it takes the form also of the throb of mantra, so that even when our ordinary mind can't dissolve into it, it can take refuge in Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to the auspicious one. I bow to the infinite. I bow with the awareness of I am that. Or Om Kali Ma, Om Kali Ma, Om Kali Ma. I am the Divine Mother. I am Kali. I am Kali. That's the power of that mantra. And just sweep you away. Srimati Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai. And you're just swept away. That's the power of these practices. It's not just, they're not mind-born. They're not just dependent on the ego mind, its will, its vagaries, it's motivated some days and not others. It begins to become more and more resonant with the power, the frequency, the vibration of that consciousness. That is both the form of mantra and what mantra dissolves into. Because mantra arises out of the stillness, out of the formless. And when we engage in it, when we enter the vehicle of mantra, it takes us back into the formlessness, the infinitude of being. And then we can see that everything is a throb of that energy. That's all there is. Dancing in every different form. That's all there is. So the practices are really aimed at that. And when we're doing mantra and engaging in mantra, because it is such a both a sublime practice and completely accessible. There's no time, there's no place when we can't be doing mantra. So I've often shared stories of doing these practices in prisons, both federal and state prisons, when I was doing work as a volunteer to bring these meditative practices in, and seeing the men in those prisons having extraordinary experiences through the power of mantra. Because there's no place it can't act, even in the concrete and steel confines of a prison. So why not anywhere we are? Right? That grace is what flows through. And there's another shift that begins to happen in Kundalini sadhana, is that shift away from just the ego mind thinking, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I'm the one making all the effort here, I'm doing all the work. We start to realize that the effort itself is Shakti. The effort itself is the infinite, the boundless one. It's the boundless one making that effort to dissolve the ignorance, the wrong understanding, the wrong identification. Grace has entered and is now acting. So we invite the mind to keep going with that. Keep letting go of I'm just this limited thing and enter, I am the infinite, I am the boundless one. Shivoham, Shivoham, Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. Chidananda means I am consciousness and bliss. Chit is Chit Shakti. It's the power of consciousness. Its nature is this ecstatic, rapturous, loving, blissful embrace of all that is as itself. Chidananda Rupaha, I am the form of consciousness and bliss. Shivoham, 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 Shivoham. That's what we dissolve into. That's what we're invited to know. So this is a yoga meant for really going beyond all the ordinary states of consciousness. This is a yoga that's meant to go beyond anything that has to do with, stress management or other, very useful and good applications of meditation. But this is the heart of the heart. This is the essence of yoga and meditation practice, because in that is the throb of the infinite, wanting us to become not relatively free, not just more relaxed, not even just having stress mastery. Know your infinitude. Be absolutely free. Be Swatantriya Shakti. Swatantriya means unimpeded freedom. It's another name for you, for your essential nature. So when we start to understand that energy, that power of consciousness, is itself informing our will. That's why in the Shiva Sutras it says, Udyamo Bhairavaha. Udyamo Bhairavaha. Effort itself is Bhairava. Bhairava is another name of Shiva. When we feel that effort, know that, you're aligned with your highest nature, your Shiva nature, your Shakti nature. Become aligned with that. Become in harmony with that. Become infused with that. Become enthused, right? Enthusiasm, to be filled with spirit. That's what carries us. So the Shiva Sutras are again explaining that the sadhana practices are based on both the unfolding of Shakti and even the effort that's happening is that energy as well, that power of consciousness. And just as the great sage Patanjali wrote about in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, he talked about how this state of meditation, this is the state of Turiya, this is the state of transcendence. And that state of consciousness that knows the infinite as itself, that we know ourselves to be the infinite, well, we can have that awareness in any of the other states. That state of consciousness pervades the waking state, so the ordinary state of consciousness, the dream state, and in sleep. Even the deep sleep state is illuminated by that. So this is a state, the state of meditation is continuous, and it subsumes the three ordinary states and transcends them. Right? So it embraces everything about the experience of those various forms of limitation that unfold in the waking, dream, and deep sleep state. It illumines them, knows it is the creator, the enjoyer, everything in them, and simultaneously maintains the awareness of its infinitude, never bound, never limited. So these words, these concepts, are like the finger pointing at the moon that I've spoken about before in the old Zen saying, don't confuse the finger with the moon. So these can point to Ma Kali. Ma Kali is Ma Shakti, the great mother, in all these forms. She takes the form of mantra. So these words and ideas can help illumine that for the mind, expand it, because so many of our concepts these days are so contracted, so limited, so materially bound. But then when we're infused with this level of understanding and truth, that is ancient, this isn't new, this has been known by the rishis and the sages and the saints for thousands of years. And that this state of consciousness then can be known throughout all the states, not just meant for just sitting. Sitting's nice, but that would be a limitation. If it was only available when your eyes are closed, your eyes are down, and you're not moving, how practical would that be? How useful would that be? How integrated would that be? There's no limitation to that state. What varies is as soon as there's movement of mind and body, this instrument of mind goes towards movement. And it either identifies with itself or sees movement out there. And you can see that's evolutionary wise, as in neuroscience and as a psychologist, you can see the evolutionary benefits of that. You'd want to pay attention to movements. Is that something that's moving that's going to eat you? You better be aware of that. So we have a lot of brain power dedicated towards noticing and going after movement, and then engaging in it and seeing itself, other, threatening, non-threatening. You can eat it, you can't eat it. You can mate with it, you can't mate with it. That's just the foundation of what that instrument was really designed to do. But our consciousness isn't limited by that. So we can open up the doors of consciousness and say, okay, yeah, we understand that's the orientation of the mind. And you can certainly see that. Anytime you're sitting for meditation, the mind will produce movements. Even it's the movement of thought. But it might be a movement in the body. It might be a sudden, I got to move my foot. I got to do it. It wants movement. It seeks movement and it seeks novelty. Those are things that every meditator learns to just keep stepping back and letting go and just watching. That's just the stream. That's just the play of consciousness going by. Rest in the one who sees it all, in the one who watches it all. Because that's the nature of the auspicious one. So that consciousness is when we're talking about Shiva nature, the auspicious one, it's this sublime, unmovable, unshakable witness is often how we first begin to experience that. And there's a Shiva Sutra that talks about that the Supreme Lord Shiva is the experiencer of the three states. And so that consciousness is what illuminates all that happens in the ordinary three states. Without that illumination, there would be no experience. Nothing. There would be, in the absence of that, even forms dissolve. So everything, even our physical form, all the forms of our thoughts and our feelings, all arise from that. They're all just the dance of little contracted ways of it constantly becoming in the play of creation. So in Shakti sadhana, and what we're really looking at is then the power of consciousness that dissolves that identification. And really that's what Kundalini Shakti is looked at. That Kundalini Shakti, this innate power of consciousness, has sort of two main facets to it. One is what sustains everything about the ordinary body and mind, lifetime after lifetime. That is the Shakti, that's Kundalini. But there's this aspect that is metaphorically dormant. And that aspect is the aspect that releases us, begins to dissolve the identification with all those different identities, forms, roles, all the things that we create and inhabit lifetime after lifetime. So it's also talking about that. It says in the Shiva Sutras, Icha Shakti Ruma Kumari, and that the power of the will is the maiden Uma. The power of will here is the power of the will of Shiva. That is Kundalini Shakti. That is Shakti. And it's that one that then begins to dissolve all the really things that the ordinary mind takes as very concrete and real. No, I am just this body. I am just this person. I can't, what's beyond my skin? Nothing, empty space. It does not have the experience of going beyond that. And in part, that's the limitation of mind. And in part, it's that energy that has said, oh, for this part of the phase of the evolution of consciousness, we're going to be really bound and identified. But with awakening, we're going to enter a new phase. And that's the phase of coming home to the infinite as our own self. And that's where then people also begin having experiences, like, for instance, making use of or hearing the mantras that we do here, or even on the videos that we've put up. I get emails from people that they're experiencing the power of that and the power of the practices because it's innate to them. And so they'll begin to have spontaneous experiences arising. They may begin even just hearing the mantra on and off through the day as the mantra begins repeating itself internally. So that is, again, the effort that's being made by the infinite from within to sustain the practice. So the ordinary mind now gets reoriented towards, how do I serve that? How do I stay attuned to that? What do I do that's going to help me be, more and more dissolving into that power of consciousness that's running through the body and the mind? And so more and more we get clear that in the sadhana of this ancient form of Kundalini Yoga, it's really about having these extraordinarily empowered practices that come through this tradition of empowered mantra, and then the letting go to attune ourselves to that internal, constantly rising awareness, the root of which is I am that. I am the infinite. I am the one. That's all there is. So when Shiva, when your auspicious one is looking at all that's unfolding, whether it's in the waking state, the dream state, or the deep sleep state, it just watches, knowing all that and all that's beyond, all that and all that's beyond. Those are words, because those are the words that only the mind can do. The awareness, all embracing, unspeakable, unimaginable. So similarly to last week when we were talking about the Heart Sutra and how Buddha was delivering this teaching to Shariputra and the bodhisattvas that had gathered about being in deep prajna, Mahaprajna Paramita. Mahaprajna Paramita is Shakti. Mahaprajna Paramita, the mother of all Buddhas, the mother of all enlightenment. She's the mother of that state, being reborn within us to know the fullness of our infinitude, even as we know what it is to be finite, and to have loving compassion for all those who are bound by what is finite. That luminous consciousness that looks out and sees, oh, there's just the mind playing. That's Buddha calling them the five skandhas. Oh, there's a thought, there's a feeling, there's a perception, there's a physical form, there's limited eye awareness. You're just watching, all illuminated. And Shiva said, watching the dance of his own beloved. This is all the dance of Shakti taking these forms. So it's lover and beloved in this exquisite dance, watching that unfolding. It's a totally different experience than what it is to be bound and limited and caught in a particular form, because then we're in the domain of suffering the consequences of being bound and limited. Right? That's where suffering resides, in that identification. That's what it meant in that knowledge is bondage, jnanam bandha. It's the knowledge of, limited knowledge. I am just this, and this is a little thing. So when we start to add the infinite, now the whole texture of experience is enriched, because we both have the experience of limitation and the experience of infinitude. And it's all the self. It's all the divine. It's every bit of it. That's what we're invited to know. That's what these practices are aimed at. That's the Shakti, Kundalini, unfolding that. And so even spontaneous movements of consciousness and meditation, spontaneous arising of mantras, spontaneous even just movements. Sometimes there's just rocking and swaying. And that too, that's a kriya. That's a form of that movement. So the kriyas that happen spontaneously as a gift of grace, a gift of the Shakti, well, they can be on a mental, emotional level. They can be on a physical level. They can affect breathing. Our breathing can stop. It can get more shallow. It can get fast. All kinds of phenomenon can unfold in that. That's what I wrote about extensively in the Awakening Kundalini, the Path to Radical Freedom book, and also the book, The Soul's Journey. They're all about being able to help people understand the profound nature of the path of Kundalini, because it's very different than personal will, born, driven kinds of practices. So it's a practice where you really allow the Shakti to move. There may be spontaneous pranayama that happens, or just slowing and deepening of the breath, another form of pranayama. But it doesn't require that you do a whole lot of things and the mind just keeps going from, I think I'll do this and then I'm going to do that. And it's reinforcing the illusion of I am this doer and I'm doing it all. That's an illusion that has to be cut through. And it's cut through by the power of grace. It's cut through by surrender, letting go of the doing and say, let the Shakti do. That's why in the end of the Bhagavad Gita, with Arjuna's last words to Lord Krishna as the perfect disciple to the embodiment of Shakti, Krishna, I will do thy bidding. He surrendered. So paths, and this is true of the upper reaches of all different traditions, whether it's the movement of Holy Spirit or however one might call it, becomes a path of surrender, a path of letting go, a path of letting go into what already is. Your perfection of consciousness fully expanded is already there. So let go. Let the Shakti make the effort. You just let go into mantra. So the little effort the mind has to do is keep that mantra going until it's going all the time itself. And then keep absorbing that. And then the mind starts to get absorbed in the awareness that is the underlying, the subtler level of mantra. The repeated awareness of I am that, I am that, I am Shiva, I am Kali. Even without words. It doesn't have to have words to it. It's just the awareness of I am that. And that's where then the fullness of our being becomes directly known. And all the words dissolve. All the thoughts, all the concepts, gone, gone, gone beyond. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi swaha. So now we're going to chant and really be able to dissolve into the power of the practice of mantra chanting. And then, after we chant for a few minutes, we'll just sit in that stillness. You might just be in the awareness of I am the infinite, I am the boundless one. But if words and thoughts, memories and feelings start to arise, then just bring the mind back to the Om Kalima, or Om Namah Shivaya, or the Hamsa mantra, very simple. The breath coming in with the sound hum and going out with the sound sa, simply meaning, I am that, I am that, I am that. That's Shiva consciousness. In the waking state, seeing everything as I am that. In the dream state, I am all of that. In the deep sleep state, I am the void. In the transcendent state, I am all that is. That's the truth of who you are and what your birthright is, to know that and live in the freedom that it confers. So we'll chant now for a few minutes and then sit in the stillness. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shivaya Namah Om Shivaya. Durga Namo Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shivaya Namah. Shivaya Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shivaya Namah. Shivaya Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shivaya Namah. Shivaya Namah. Om Kali Ma. Om Kali Ma. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Kali Durga Namo Namah. Resting in that awareness, the awareness that is pure Shakti, the pure power of consciousness. It sees all. It knows. I am that. I am that. We end with this prayer, that may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. And namaste. All Shiva, all Shakti, all the effort, Shiva Shakti. Even becoming a seeker is the stirring of grace. A seeker is one who's seeing through the illusion of what the offerings of the conditioned mind and culture and family and everything, looking beyond, saying there's more. That intuition, that sense of there's more to know, there's more fullness. And that seeking is itself the Shakti, the movement of grace. The longing is that longing to know, the longing to merge, the longing to return to that state of union. That's the part of Shiva wanting to get back to its fullness as Shiva. That's the wave wanting to dissolve back into the ocean. The ocean always knows it's the waves and it's the fullness of the ocean. But sometimes the wave forgets. But it's going to come back. That return. Dissolving back in. Merging back into the one. The truth of who you are. Then you know yourself as the ocean. The ocean of what? Well, that's what Buddha called the four immeasurables. The ocean of compassion. The ocean of love. The ocean of wisdom. The ocean of equanimity and steadiness. You're all of that, all at once, simultaneously. And so this power that we call in the yogic system Kundalini Shakti is the power of that consciousness. That finally in the soul's journey across lifetimes, evolving, learning, comes to the point where it's time for the wave to descend and merge back in the ocean. You're the wave, longing and merging back into the one that became the many, but never lost its nature as the one. And that's who you are. So keep coming back to that awareness. Keep honoring that, the seeking, the longing. Out of that, it's the living presence of the energy, the Shakti, the power of grace. The mantra arises. And out of that, become immersed in that. Become identified with that. I'm a throb of the infinite. I'm a throb of the mantra. I'm a throb of the awareness of I am that. That's what this sadhana is about. It's going with the power of grace so that it permeates the mind and body. So that it so drenches every cell in the brain with its power that it dissolves any remnant of just solely being identified with mind and body. We know our infinitude. We know what it is to be finite and all that is. That's what it is to come home to yourself. So I want to thank you for being ones who engage in that, live that, practice in the many different ways that you practice, walking it into the many domains of life, work, relationships. Thank you for doing that. You're a living, walking presence of grace as that. So bring that into the world wherever you might be. Might be as simple as a smile. Might be just being kind and gentle with somebody. It's all of that. It's all of that. So thank you. Thank you for your commitment to practice and for coming this evening and bringing the power and strength of your practice and your divine presence to this evening. And of course, thank you all for the many ways you support Anamkar and share our offerings of YouTube videos and the e-newsletter and supporting us with your donations. Thank you. Your support makes this possible. So with all my heart and with all my love, and again, thank you for coming this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.